My name is Emily Carter. I'm 32 years old, and if you ask anyone in New York's fashion scene, they'll tell you I'm the founder of EC Studio, a sustainable fashion brand worth millions. To the world, I'm a success story, a woman who stitched her way to the top. But if you ask my family for most of my life, I was a disappointment. 10 years ago, my parents told me to leave their house. They didn't call, didn't write, didn't even send a text on my birthday. I was gone from their lives, erased like a bad sketch. Then, last December, out of nowhere, I got a call from my mother. "Emily, we'd love for you to come home for Christmas. The family wants to see you." I said yes, but I didn't go empty-handed. I brought a gift they would never forget. I grew up in Boston in a home where ambition wasn't just encouraged, it was demanded. My father, Dr. Richard Carter, was a celebrated surgeon whose patients spoke of him like he was a miracle worker. My mother, Laura Carter, was a law professor at one of the top universities in the state. At the dinner table, conversations weren't about feelings or hobbies. They were about grades, career plans, and how each of us would carry the Carter legacy forward. My older brother, Michael, was the golden boy Harvard Law destined for a partnership at a prestigious firm before he even graduated. My younger sister Anna had been dissecting frogs in the 8th grade and dreaming of becoming a doctor ever since. My parents beamed at them. They were perfect fits for the family blueprint. And then there was me. I was the odd sketch in a perfect gallery. While my siblings brought home honor roll certificates and trophies, I came home with fabric swatches, half-finished dresses, and sketches of designs that lived in my head. I could spend hours in my room sewing clothes for my dolls as a kid, then later for myself. To me, fabric was alive. It draped, moved, and told a story. But to my parents, it was just cloth. Emily's sewing is a hobby, not a career. My mother would say, her tone clipped, like she was correcting a legal error. You need to focus on something real, something respectable. My father rarely raised his voice. But when I mentioned wanting to apply to Parsons School of Design instead of law school, his disappointment was a thundercloud in the room. "We've given you every opportunity and you're going to throw it away to play with fabric." Play! That word stung. It wasn't just the disapproval, it was the constant comparison. "Why can't you be more like Michael? Anna knows what she wants. Why don't you?" Every question chipped away at me until I felt like I was shrinking into the seams of my own life. The only person who seemed to see me was my grandmother, Grace. She wasn't a designer, but she had magic in her hands. She'd sewn her own clothes during the war years and taught me how to thread a needle when I was 7. "Clothes can change how a person feels about themselves," she'd say, handing me a hem to finish. "And you, my dear, can change the world with yours." Her words were my safe place. But in my parents' house, dreams like mine had no space to breathe. They had a plan for me, and every day I refused to follow it. The walls between us grew higher. I didn't know it then, but those walls would one day become an unbridgeable distance. One phone call, one decision, and 10 years of silence. The breaking point came on a rainy Sunday evening, the kind of cold Boston night where the air feels heavy and damp. We were sitting around the dinner table, my father at the head reading something on his tablet, my mother slicing roast chicken with precision, Michael scrolling on his phone, and Anna flipping through medical school brochures. I was the only one without a respectable pile of papers in front of me. I had rehearsed my words all day the way someone rehearses before a trial. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear the sound of cutlery clinking against plates. "I'm not applying to law school," I said. The room stilled. My father sat down his tablet slowly like a judge about to deliver a verdict. "What did you just say?" His voice was calm, but every syllable carried weight. "I'm applying to Parsons School of Design in New York." I continued, my voice shaking but steady enough to be heard. "I want to study fashion design. That's where I belong." My mother's knife froze mid-air. Michael looked up, half amused, half disbelieving. Anna just stared at me, her face unreadable. "Fashion design," my father repeated as if the words themselves were foreign. "Emily, you can sew as a hobby. You cannot make a life out of it. I can and I will. The air between us was electric with tension. My mother spoke next, her voice sharp. You are throwing away every opportunity we've given you. Do you have any idea how ungrateful this sounds? I'm not ungrateful, I said, fighting the lump in my throat. I'm just tired of pretending I want a life that isn't mine. My father's voice deepened, slow and deliberate. If you walk down this path, don't expect us to fund it. No tuition, no rent, no handouts. You'll be on your own. I wanted to say I didn't care. I wanted to tell him I was ready. But my stomach twisted at the thought of actually surviving without their support. Then I thought of Grandma Grace, her warm kitchen, the sound of the sewing machine humming like a heartbeat, her belief that I could create something beautiful in this world. I could hear her voice in my head. The things worth doing will always scare you first. I understand, I said. My hands were trembling under the table, but I didn't let them see. The rest of dinner was silent. Not the comfortable kind of silence, but the cold, suffocating kind. That night I packed a few clothes, my sketchbooks, the battered Singer sewing machine Grandma had given me. As I folded each piece of fabric into my bag, my chest tightened, but I didn't cry. Before I left the next morning, I called Grandma. She didn't sound surprised. I'll send you a little something to get started, she said. It's not much, but I believe in you. And with those words, I stepped out of the Carter house, the rain soaking through my sneakers. I didn't look back, not because I didn't care, but because I knew if I saw the familiar windows glowing behind me, I might lose my nerve. I took the train to New York with $500 in my pocket, a sewing machine at my feet, and the kind of fragile hope that feels like both a curse and a lifeline. I didn't know if I'd succeed. I just knew I couldn't keep living someone else's life. New York was louder, faster, and more expensive than I ever imagined. The city didn't care about my dreams. It barely cared if I could keep up. I found a room in a shared apartment in Queens, barely big enough for a twin bed and my sewing machine. The walls were so thin I could hear my neighbor arguing over rent through the plaster. I paid $450 a month, which meant most of the $500 Grandma had sent me vanished on day one. During the day I took classes at Parsons. At night I worked wherever I could, serving coffee at a 24-hour diner, stocking shelves, at a discount store, folding jeans in a department store. The hours blurred together until my body felt like it was made of equal parts caffeine and stubbornness. Even with 3 jobs, I couldn't afford proper fabric. I scavenged scraps from textile shops, begged for damaged rolls at wholesale warehouses, and even pulled fabric from old curtains I found at thrift stores. My first school projects were patchwork, not because I was experimenting, but because that's all I had. Some nights I sat at my sewing machine until 300 a.m., the whir of the needle keeping me awake more than any cup of coffee could. I'd fall asleep with a pin still tucked behind my ear, only to wake up 4 hours later and start again. The loneliness was the worst part. Every holiday, my classmates flew home to families who would hug them, feed them, and ask about their classes. I stayed in my apartment, heating up instant noodles and pretending I didn't notice the silence. I tried calling my parents once around Thanksgiving. My mother picked up, said she was busy, and hung up before I could even tell her how I was. That was the last time I tried for a while, but there were glimmers of light. My design professor, Ms. Lopez, saw something in my work. One afternoon, she stopped by my desk as I was piecing together a dress from an old bedsheet and whispered, "You have vision, Emily. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Her words carried me through the nights when I questioned everything. Nights when the city felt like it was chewing me up and spitting me out. I started selling small pieces, handmade scarves, tote bags, skirts to classmates and friends of friends. I'd package them in brown paper, tie them with leftover ribbon, and include a handwritten note. "Thank you for believing in something made by hand." It wasn't much money, but it was a seed. Still, for every sale, there were a dozen rejections. Boutiques told me my work was too personal or not commercial enough. A Fashion Week intern I met at a networking event actually laughed when I told him I worked out of a bedroom in Queens. I learned to swallow the sting and keep going. By the end of my first year, I'd survived, not thrived, not succeeded, but survived. I'd paid my rent every month, passed my classes, and kept my dream alive by the thinnest of threads. Grandma's voice stayed with me. The things worth doing will always scare you first. I didn't know how or when or even if my break would come. But I knew one thing for certain. No matter how many times the city tried to knock me down, I wasn't going back. I'd left Boston with nothing but a sewing machine and a promise to myself. I intended to keep it. It happened on a Tuesday, a day I almost skipped class because I'd worked a double shift at the diner the night before. My eyes were gritty, my hands sore from both sewing and scrubbing counters, but something told me to push through. We had a project due create a complete outfit inspired by transformation. I'd made mine from thrift store curtains and leftover satin scraps. It was a flowing emerald green dress, asymmetrical, with a neckline I'd hand-stitched until my fingers bled. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. After class, one of my classmates, Mia, asked if she could borrow the dress for a small rooftop event she was attending. "It's just a networking thing," she said. "There'll be a few influencers there. Might be fun." I didn't think much of it until my phone buzzed that night. "Emily, your dress is blowing up on Instagram." I opened the app and froze. There was Mia twirling under string lights, the city skyline behind her. The emerald fabric caught the glow like it was alive. And next to her smile was a caption from a fashion influencer with over 500,000 followers. "Obsessed with this upcycled beauty buy at Emily Carter Design." Within an hour, my inbox was flooded. Strangers wanted to know if the dress was for sale. Could I make one in red and black? Could I do custom orders? For the first time, people outside my tiny circle were seeing me not just as a student scraping by, but as a designer. I stayed up all night answering messages, sketching variations, calculating costs. By morning, I had 8 orders and barely enough fabric to fill them. I skipped class that day, sprinted to every fabric shop I knew, and bargained for scraps like they were gold. The next few weeks were chaos in the best way. My apartment turned into a workshop. The kitchen table became a cutting station, my bed a fabric storage unit. I packed each order myself, writing notes to every customer, thanking them for supporting something handmade. Then the momentum grew. More influencers started wearing my pieces. One tagged me in a photo from Paris Fashion Week, not on the runway, but standing outside the venue, turning heads in a coat I'd made from vintage wool. I couldn't believe it. The same coat had been rejected by 3 boutiques months earlier. Now people were messaging me from France, Italy, Japan. With the extra income, I moved into a slightly bigger apartment, still in Queens, but with a separate room I could call my studio. I bought my first industrial sewing machine. And for the first time since leaving home, I could breathe without constantly worrying about rent. But the best moment came one quiet evening when I received a handwritten letter in the mail. The return address stopped me cold. It was from Grandma Grace. She'd written, "I saw your name in a magazine today. I knew this day would come. You've always had the hands and the heart for this. Keep sewing, my girl. Keep proving them wrong, though. I know you're not doing it for them." I sat at my work, the hum of the sewing machine still in my ears, and let the tears fall. Not the tears of someone beaten down, but the kind that come when you realize the tide has finally started to turn. I wasn't a millionaire, not yet, but for the first time I could see the shore. By the time I turned 32, EC Studio had grown beyond anything I dared to imagine in that cramped Queens bedroom. We had a flagship store in Soho, another in Los Angeles, and a third opening in London. Celebrities wore my designs on red carpets. My name was in magazines, my face on talk shows. That was when the phone call came. It was a Wednesday afternoon in early December. I was reviewing fabric samples in my office when my assistant poked her head in. "There's a Laura Carter online too. She says she's your mother." For a moment, my hands forgot how to move. 10 years. 10. Christmases alone, 10 birthdays without a single call. And now this. I picked up the phone, my voice careful. "Hello, Emily," my mother said, as if she'd spoken my name every day. "It's been far too long. We'd love for you to come home for Christmas this year. The whole family will be there. Michael, Anna, your father." Her tone was light, almost cheerful, like she was inviting me to brunch after a busy week, not reaching across a decade of silence. "Why now?" I asked before I could stop myself. There was a pause. "It's Christmas, darling. It's time to be together again." I didn't answer right away. My mind flickered back to the nights I'd eaten instant noodles alone in my apartment while snow fell outside. The times I'd seen their names pop up on social media, smiling in holiday photos without me. The way they'd erased me from the family narrative like I'd never existed. I thought of Grandma Grace, how she'd always told me forgiveness was a gift I should give for my own peace, not theirs. But forgiveness didn't mean forgetting, and it didn't mean walking into the same room empty-handed. "I'll be there," I said finally. There was a hint of surprise in my mother's voice. "Wonderful. We can't wait to see you." After I hung up, I sat in my office for a long time, staring at the skyline through the window. I didn't know exactly what I would say to them, but I knew one thing: I wouldn't arrive as the girl they threw out. I'd walk in as the woman who had built her own life, her own name without a single penny from them, and I'd bring something they would never forget. The snow crunched under my boots as I walked up the long driveway of my parents' Boston home. The house looked exactly as it had the day I left: white clapboard siding, green shutters, a perfectly decorated wreath on the front door. But to me, it wasn't just a house. It was the place where I'd been told I wasn't enough. I rang the bell. When the door opened, my mother stood there in a cashmere sweater, her smile wide but brittle. "Emily," she said, leaning in for a hug. I didn't return right away. Inside, the house smelled of cinnamon and roasted turkey. The living room glittered with Christmas lights. My father was by the fireplace, drink in hand, talking to Michael and Anna. They turned when they saw me, their smiles polite but strained, like they were greeting an old colleague rather than a sister. We exchanged the usual small talk. How was my flight? How cold New York must be in December? How busy I must be with my business? They didn't ask how I'd been during the 10 years they ignored me, and I didn't volunteer it. Dinner was a blur of chatter about Michael's firm, Anna's medical research, and my father's recent speaking engagement. I listened, nodded, but kept my real thoughts to myself. Finally, when the plates were cleared and coffee was served, I said, "I brought you all a gift." The room went quiet. From my bag, I pulled out a sleek black envelope for each of them. My mother looked curious. My father's brow furrowed. Michael smirked like he expected theater tickets. "Go ahead," I said. They opened them in unison. Inside each was a deed, official, notarized, transferring ownership of the Carter family home. "To me," I said calmly. "I bought it last month." My father's face went pale. "What is this supposed to mean?" "It means," I said, my voice steady, "that the house you told me to leave will never throw me out again. It's mine now, and you can stay if you like, rent-free, as long as you want. Consider it my Christmas gift." My mother blinked rapidly, her lips parting in shock. "Emily, why?" "Because I can," I said simply. "Because the girl you thought would fail built a life without you. And because I wanted you to know there's no bitterness left, only clarity." Michael let out a low whistle. Anna just stared at me, her eyes softening for the first time all evening. My father set his coffee down. "You think this proves something?" "No," I said. "It doesn't prove anything to you, but it proves something to me: that I don't need your approval to stand in this room, that I'm not the lost cause you thought I was." The silence stretched. Then, surprisingly, my mother's voice cracked. "We were wrong," she whispered. "We thought we were protecting you from failure. We didn't see what you were capable of." For a moment, I almost let myself believe her. But then I remembered the nights in that freezing apartment, the rejections, the feeling of being unwanted by the people who should have loved me most. I smiled faintly. "I hope you enjoy the house. Merry Christmas." I stood hugged. Anna quickly nodded to Michael and walked toward the door. My mother called my name once softly, but I didn't turn back. Outside, the snow had started falling again, flakes catching in my hair. I took a deep breath of the cold night air, feeling lighter than I had in years. The gift hadn't been about revenge. It had been about reclaiming the part of my life they thought they could erase. And as I walked down the driveway toward my car, I realized something. This wasn't the end of the story. It was the closing of a chapter I'd been writing since the night I left home with a sewing machine and a suitcase. The next chapter was mine, and mine alone. Driving back to my hotel that night, the city lights blurred through the windshield. Part snow, part tears I hadn't realized were falling. They weren't tears of regret. They were the release of a weight I'd carried for 10 years. I thought about the girl who had left Boston with 500 a sewing machine and a dream that felt almost too fragile to speak aloud. She had been scared, unsure, and so desperately in need of love from people who wouldn't give it. But somewhere along the way, through every rejection, every late-night stitching under dim light, every sale that felt like a miracle, she had found something better than their approval. She had found herself. Owning the house didn't matter in the way they thought it did. It wasn't about power or control. It was about closure, about standing in the very place I'd been told I didn't belong, knowing I had built a life worth living without them. As the snow kept falling, I realized Christmas would never be the same for me. Not because of them, but because I had learned to give myself the kind of gift no one could take away. Freedom. And maybe, just maybe, that was the only gift that truly mattered.